Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today, I bring you Gina Parris. For years, I struggled to find the clarity of purpose in my life and the single-minded focus that I had when I was an athlete. You know, it just felt like I was working hard but not really getting any closer to where I wanted to go. And to be honest, I really didn't even know or have a clear vision on where I wanted to go. Then I discovered a powerful 4-step blueprint that I began to apply to my life, and it changed everything. Now, every morning, I'm excited to attack the day because I have a clarity of purpose and I have confidence in my plan and I have peace of mind in knowing that I'm back on that path to elite success. Anyone, and I mean anyone, can use this 4-step process to recreate the key elements in the life of an elite performer so you can regain that clarity of purpose and that single-minded focus so that you can both achieve your goals and live a balanced life. I created a free PDF for you outlining the 4-step Reveal Your Path Blueprint for Success. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/blueprint. That's jimharshawjr.com/blueprint to get instant access to that free PDF. Gina has been a motivator in the field of personal development for over 30 years. She began studying, applying, and teaching on high performance as a teenager. When she was not speaking or training as a competitive athlete, she was honing her sales skills at a specialty menswear boutique where she was a top performer, and she even gave her first paid speech at 16 years old. It's been Gina's life's work to help people reach their God-given potential and to turn their stress into strength. She's a Tony Robbins certified strategic intervention coach, and her clients include top athletes, coaches, and sports parents, as well as entrepreneurs and other professionals. As usual, if you don't have time to listen to this entire episode, or if you like something you hear, make sure you go to jimharshawjr.com/action to get access to the action plan from this episode and all the other good downloads that I have there on the resource page. Gina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am a success at being a failure, so I must be at the right place.
Yeah, every successful person is, right? Every successful person has tons of failures in their background, so we're going to get into that for sure.
Awesome.
Gina, you have 4 kids, right? And one of them was drafted by the Rockies, is that right?
Yes, and that was a fun client because, of course, your kid's the last person to call you. That one was, he'd call every 4 years, Mom, I'm in a slump. But in senior year, he called and we got some huge breakthrough and it was great seeing him drafted because he was never the superstar on the team. So it was awesome.
So what do you think got him drafted? I mean, if he wasn't the superstar, you think someone who gets drafted, they're going to be the superstar on the team. What do you think gave him the edge? The mental side, or what do you think gave him the edge?
Yeah, well, he was, I guess if you knew catchers, because he was a catcher, so they knew that he was really powerful behind the plate, but his hitting was just so weak. In fact, it probably is why he's not still there. But at that point, being able to overcome those blocks that he would have and really clear them helped him to connect enough towards the end of his season to really make it clear that he did belong at the next level.
And you told me it finally took working with one of his teammates before he finally called you for some help. Is that right?
Yeah, it's so funny because he and I had a huge breakthrough as 7th graders when he was a 7th grader. So I wrote a manual and that got really popular. In fact, I'm relaunching it for Kindle. And so for all these years, I'd have other players come and hire me. And this one happened to go to his university. And so one night Jordan calls me and he says, "Oh my gosh, Mama, the entire bullpen is talking about you." And I said, "Your bullpen is talking about me?" He said, "Yes, because David Hess had been in that horrible slump and he came flying out there in the 7th inning or whatever inning, 6th, and struck out those 11 batters in a row. And everyone said, 'What the heck happened to you?' And after the game, he told them, 'Well, it's because I called Parris's mom.'" So he said, "So they're all telling me, 'Parris, what are you doing holding out?'" And so it was cute. He said, "So really, I was calling to see if you'd work with another one of my pitchers." They're all his, right? I said, "Of course I will. But honey, you're just hitting 179. Are you sure you just want me for your pitcher?" And he said, "Yeah. And can you help me too?" So he called the next day. It was an away game. But he called before the game and he was really descriptive about where he was blocked, which I love that when an athlete is specific on where there's the breakdown. Like he said, "I just can't picture it. I can picture the ball leaving his hand. I can picture, my swing." But he said, "I cannot for the life of me picture hitting the ball." And so that's why visualization doesn't always help, right? If you seriously blocked. And so we did, in that case, we used energy therapy. I used EFT, and we tapped through all his issues and all his belief and that visualization. And he hung up, and I had to watch it on the TV because I couldn't be there. In the first at bat, the announcers are like, "Well, Parris steps into the plate hitting 179. Of course, he's in the lineup for his prowess behind the plate." And they say, "Oh my gosh, he just hit it over the left field wall." And
Wow.
so he just smashed it. Yeah. And then the second at bat, they're sort of chatting because, he's just the 9-hole hitter. And they're chatting and you hear this pop and you see it sail. And they said, "Oh my gosh, did he do it again? Did he do it again? Parris hits the ball the second time over the left field wall for his 3rd home run of his college career."
Wow.
And then he did it, his third at bat, he hit it to right field. And then his next at bat, he hit it, it was another hit. And then they walked him. So he went 4 for 5 with a walk. And in the rest of his season, he hit really strong. But he'd call me before every game. It was so funny. I said, "Jordan, my other clients, they don't call before every single game." He's like, I know, but
Your mom.
yeah, exactly. So he did great. And David Hess got drafted as well with a big 6-figure bonus, which is about hundreds of thousands more than Jordan got, right?
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, but it's always a treat to bring out the best in your kids,
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You mentioned EFT. What is that?
Yeah, it stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And it's based originally, I think, the person who made it famous was a Stanford trained engineer. And so he's had learned this meridian-based philosophy from somebody else. And so the philosophy is based on sort of an Eastern mentality that the energy in your body flows along certain meridians. I know in karate, we had to learn these meridians to promote belts. But as you focus on a distressing trigger, you can tap on some of these meridian targets that are close enough to the surface, like around your eyes and your collarbone. And you can disrupt that stress response signal. And so it's become, hugely popular in stress relief and trauma. I thought it was the stupidest thing in the world until I saw it with Vietnam veterans. And that was way back in probably 2006. Wow. Yeah. So it changed my life, and then it changed my client's life. So I'm pretty sold on the technique.
So you do this with athletes and others as well, or mostly just athletes?
Yeah, everybody. So everybody seems to have some kind of trauma, or with athletes, we'll work on the symptom, like whatever's blocking them, wherever their slump is. And so sometimes that's all they need. Like, oh, I can't see it. Now I see it, but sometimes it goes a lot deeper. So it's really beautiful. You might ask, well, for example, I was working with a player that has the yips, which in the baseball world is like, you know, being bit by a vampire, like, oh my God, my life is over. But it's not, remember, because every frustration is an invitation to come up higher. So as I asked this young player, well, what words would you describe it as when you can't, you know, when you get all tense? He's like, oh my God, my whole arm gets tense. I just feel sick. I hate making that short throw. I just feel powerless. And so we asked, well, when do you remember the very earliest feeling powerless? And we thought about different memories and Little League and different stuff. He's a college player now. And he said, well, I just remembered something. He said, when I was little, I was in the hospital. I was about 6 years old, and I was in the hospital, and I had this walking pneumonia, and I was there for 6 days. And I remember the doctor asking me, do you play any sports? And he said, I just froze. And I had to write the word baseball. So that seems completely, you know, non-traumatic or whatever. But as we tapped on that memory, his symptoms almost completely ended. You know, he texted back after that next game and said, oh my gosh, I only barely felt anxious on the throw-arounds, and throw-arounds were the only thing we didn't work on. He said, other than that, I felt incredible. And so we worked on the throw-arounds, which didn't have any deep story behind them. And then he never yipped again, you know, so then he just liked calling me for whatever, you know, like I'm hitting, I want to hit more, or, you know, so players tend to want to keep me for the whole season, but I always start with their most immediate pressing issue. And I haven't found anything more effective when I combine it with all the other tactics, really, of strategic intervention and thinking systemically.
Wow, that's interesting. So for the listener who wants to check that out, I imagine they can just go to your website, get in touch with you there. I mean, we'll certainly promote you know, all the ways to find you and follow you, et cetera, at the end of the show. But your website is builttowin.com. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the best one to go to? I know you have a couple.
Yeah, builttowin.com.
Great. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And another thing you mentioned was visualization and certainly the importance of it. But, you know, you mentioned that some athletes have a hard time being specific, or I guess it helps when they're specific. Well, what I found is out in the real world, so, you know, you take someone who maybe was an athlete, now they're in the real world, or somebody maybe who never even was an athlete, now in the real world, and they're having trouble visualizing success or whatever it is they want. And I know that I struggle with that for a long time. And I kind of have my own sort of method of visualization of success and what I want. But it's hard. You know, I know for when I was an athlete, when I was a wrestler, I was visualizing, it was very easy for me to visualize a 7-minute wrestling match, because that's what I had to visualize, right? A 7-minute match. And I'd visualize all the different scenarios, and, you know, and it was very clear and easy for me to do. But now success isn't defined just in winning a wrestling match. Now it's defined, you know, with my family, with my health, with my finances, with everything in my life. There's so many different things. I mean, how does one go about being specific in visualizing in the real world, especially if we don't know what to be specific on? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, I love it. And, you know, that was a fun thing with my oldest son, because all through high school he would say, you know, I just want to get drafted and play a few years of professional ball to give validity to what I do next. So he was always thinking what would be next. And so even though he didn't know, we started asking, well, what kind of things do you want? Well, I want a job with some stability, but with no limit to what I can earn. Like, okay, that's awesome. You know, let's write that down with a guaranteed income, but no limit. What else? Well, I want to work with people that I love, like that are really cool, because that's what I love about baseball. My team's so cool. Okay, well, write that down. You know, I want to work with amazing people. What else? What city do you want to live in? Well, I'd like to be maybe in Chattanooga. I love Chattanooga, or Nashville. Okay, write that down. And, you know, as you start to think of, well, what don't you want? Well, I don't want to be like, you know, my friends that are working 80 hours a week and never a regular schedule. Okay, write down that you want to work 8 to 5 or whatever. I don't know. He does 7:30 to 5:30, but this is what he ends up with. That's awesome, And so I think as you can start with what you for sure don't want, and then what you do want, you can get bigger and bigger, and then drill down. Okay, so daily, I write on my to-do list. I write at the top of it all the time. I am becoming whatever. For a long time, it was I am becoming a internationally known speaker and coach. I'm becoming a well-known thought leader, or I'm becoming an inspiration to thousands of people. So I think those things will help. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are sort of, I guess, different areas of visualization for the real world, right? I mean, certainly that changes, but there are certainly these different sort of, I don't know, maybe not silos probably isn't the right word, but I guess sort of different categories of success that we want to visualize in the real world. When we're an athlete, it's so clear, right? It's so simple. It's so clear, and I always talk about how as an athlete, we have such clarity on our goals. It's why as an athlete, we're able to overcome failure easier, not easily, but more easily than we are in the real world, because we have these teammates around us. We have this environment. I call it the environment of excellence, where we have teammates and coaches and support staff, and we're maybe reading books about our sport and watching videos about our sport. So we're in this environment where when we're out in the real world and we experience failure, whether it's big or small, we don't always have that environment. For example, if you're trying to diet and lose 10 pounds and you diet for a couple of weeks and you work out and you step on the scale and you realize you gained a pound or lost 1 pound when you thought you lost 5, then these little failures, if you're not surrounded with this environment of, for example, in this scenario, people who want to lose weight. Maybe they're part of your, you meet with them at the gym, or they're friends of yours who you're sort of working together with, or you create almost like a mastermind or a group of people you're working through this with. If you don't have that, it's easy to let these little failures just create the self-doubt. Like, I can't do this. I guess I just can't lose weight. Or I guess it's too hard for me. And we have all that in place when we're athletes, and we don't in the real world. And that's really what I encourage people to do. And that's what I do with people through my program, which is Reveal Your Path.
Oh, man, you are singing my song. I say the exact same thing. One of my steps, I have this 5-step path that, spells SCORE. I know that's so original, but how we spell out our vision and then commit to the process and optimize our environment, raise our skill set, and eliminate our internal blocks.
Yeah.
But that, when you're an entrepreneur, that whole piece of commit to the process, you're like, oh, well, what's the process?
Right.
It's much different.
Yeah, absolutely. And so SCORE, I'm gonna have that for the listener. I'll have that in the action plan, so you don't have to try to scribble that
awesome.
down. I love that. So that's pretty good.
Very cool. Yeah.
And you mentioned briefly the manual that you wrote. Is that the Athlete's Edge?
Yes, that's the Athlete's Edge. So that is, like I said, I'm working on it now to reformat it for Kindle, so that shouldn't take too long. And I'm adding in the yips chapters because I hadn't worked with many when I first wrote it. So that should be coming out soon. And then that will have also where you can get videos and stuff to help understand the process.
Excellent. And I will have links to everything we're talking about here in the action plan for the listener, jimharshawjr.com/action. And so, Gina, you've also helped people translate that into marriage and relationships, right? Success in marriage, relationships. I mean, entrepreneurs, you work with a lot of different people, right?
Yes, absolutely. Because a lot of sports psychologists, they're like, oh, I know it's all related, but I'm not good at relationship stuff. Or there's so many of them now. There's lots of sports mental coaches. A lot of them are really young. Like, holy cow, they haven't even been married, let alone raised teenagers. So I love speaking into those relationship issues. And the same thing, apply what you learned in sport to winning at love, because you just don't know the rules. You haven't got a clear vision of who you want to be in a relationship, what the rules are, how you meet each other's needs, and how to win. So really, it's not as frightening as it seems.
Yeah, I think most of it all comes back to actually sitting down and considering it and thinking about it and working on it, being intentional about how we live and being intentional about our goals. And we were so intentional as athletes And
Yes.
and we get into the real world and we just kind of go through the motions and do what our boss tells us to do and kind of move through the world that way, as opposed to intentionally setting goals and surrounding ourselves with the right people and living our life in a way that we want it to go.
And absolutely.
And so talk about how someone in the real world can apply some of this stuff. I mean, whether the entrepreneur or the teacher, or maybe they're just a professional or a youth coach that, youth coaching on the side, but how do they take these lessons learned in sports and really translate them into the real world, whether it's getting out of slump or otherwise?
Well, I think it's so important to know what it is that you really want, because our state is always determined by these three things. We call them the super trifecta of state mastery, right? And that's your focus, the meaning you give to that focus, and your physiology. And so a lot of times, we're good at faking the physiology as much as possible, right? We'll try to fake it till we make it, or be it till we see it, I like to say. So I don't like fake anything. So just be it till you see it physically, as you act big and breathe big and commit big. But that meaning is so subjective, right? Like one person can have a failure and they see it as, yes, I'm that much closer to my goal, where someone else has a failure and they take it upon themselves as, oh, I am a failure. So to know, when you're looking at the meaning, why are you applying a certain meaning based on what you want? So if you're saying, well, I have to win this competition, I have to get this client, I have to earn this income, you need to know why. What's the meaning you're attaching to that? In my case, I know like the greatest, I think, failure that I went through that shaped a lot of this stuff was way back as that teenager and 19, 20, 22-year-old, when I was already, really pretty visible and doing motivational speaking. And I hung with a group of friends who were very well known in the motivational world. And I was so image conscious. Everything was about trying to look perfect so that I would have the acceptance of people I was speaking into. And so I made this mistake of thinking that I had to look perfect and perform perfectly and achieve these high standards just for their approval. And so you want to understand what's the meaning that you're giving it, and is it because so many of us that choose significance, we're really trying to get love. We think we won't be loved unless we're significant. So when I realized that as a youngster, it made a huge difference to me to realize, oh my gosh, I've given myself this horrible eating disorder, which makes me walk in constant shame and constant feeling of, if people knew, nobody would have any respect for me. It took years, right? So for years, you start to think, oh my God, this learned helplessness, like I might not ever be free of this. I can't even picture being free of this at this point. And then to realize, and in my case, it was in a dream, realized that I had such a low I was so much self-loathing just because of the way I'm built. It was not popular to have a big butt and little waist back then. I don't know. I don't know what changed. Should have been born later, but it was so mortifying to me. I'd compare myself to all these thick, skinny people and hated myself for it. I thought I was just fat bitch or whatever. And to realize that I thought nobody would love me. And when I put it in words, I thought, oh my gosh, that can't be true. That I would never treat someone else like this. So that meaning to everything I was focusing on made the biggest difference, and was the beginning of like super fast healing that came after that, like within months. So.
Wow. So that was you. So you struggle with eating disorder and you got through it. You got through it was it a process you went through, or was it something, did it just happen for you, or what? How do we replicate that in our own lives?
Yeah. So anything I think it's why I'm so compassionate towards anyone with any kind of addictive behavior. I'm so compassionate. It doesn't matter if it's drinking or gambling or even, porn or whatever, all this stuff, it plays into the same for one thing, your brain, the brain science is how your brain's just craving that dopamine response. But a lot of it is a reflection of your self-image and your fears. And so in my case, I had this dream and I saw myself just, killing myself, like cramming food down my face. And I thought, this is so weird. Just, you're such a fat bitch and no one's ever going to love you. And as soon as I heard that part and I saw how it was a form of just really self-abuse, it broke my own heart to a place of self-compassion. And I thought, all right, I woke up just really in a state of, okay, that's not going to ever happen again. And so then the process that brought healing was really this tiny little book. It was called Thin Within. I mean, I got professional help too, but the therapist would just look at me and go, "Oh my God, you're like so close to healthy. You're already there." But so this book just really talked about the whole psycho-cybernetics process that Dr. Maxwell Maltz made famous in the 60s, how everything's based on your self-image. And so instead of studying people who diet, like this diet or that diet, the author said, we decided to study people who are naturally slender, who never think about their weight. And it just made so much sense. And so the little habits in my case were, hey, this is how I relax. This is how I only eat when I'm hungry. I stop eating before I'm full. And I only eat and drink the things my body loves, like super simple rules, right? And so within months, I was so free of that. It's been decades now, of course, and I've applied that same concept to other things where I've really struggled. Like, okay, what's my self-image? And what are the simplest rules that naturally successful people follow that they don't even think about?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that so much of this is based on our self-image and our desire to be loved and significant.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to really unravel. I mean, how do you go about unraveling that? And and the other thing you mentioned, which is along these same lines, is you've got to figure out your why. I mean, is it, for the listener, they might be,
right,
on the treadmill or driving down the road and they're like, okay, I know my why. It's because X.
Yeah.
I mean, what now? I mean, do they need to write it down? Do they need to journal about it? Do they need to set goals around that? I mean, what's the next step?
I would ask, what are all the ways that you can feel loved? Or whatever your X is. Well, because then I'll be significant. Then I'll have the approval of so-and-so. Then I will be able to be financially free and have some peace. So if you want peace or significance or meaning or connection, all those things, it's good to then start asking, well, what are some other ways I can meet that need? How can I focus on giving that, being the source of that, instead of being needy and having to receive that? And so it's a switch that you can flip, and then you'll attract people that, like our environment, you'll attract people that support it.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that opportunities come up and people, the universe conspires. I read this somewhere recently that the universe conspires to work in your favor whenever you set these big goals,
Yes.
And you have real meaning behind those goals. And I think that's the important part is, a lot of times we set goals in our lives based on what culture or society tells us, or what we see parked in our neighbor's driveway, or what our parents want for us, or what we see on Facebook, smiling, happy families that are perfect. People take a picture of their vacation. They don't show you a picture of the temper tantrum of the kid's temper tantrum that just happened a minute ago, or the spousal argument that happened 5 minutes after that. You just see these smiling faces. And I think it's important to really create goals that are meaningful to you, because when you create goals that are meaningful to somebody else, then the first stumbling block you hit, you stop, or you quit, or you feel self-doubt, or you let that self-doubt stop you as opposed to pushing through it.
Absolutely. And the faster you can move to a state of gratitude, the faster the fears dissipate.
Yeah, state of gratitude, so important. I'm reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius right now, and it's such a great book. And, this is a Roman emperor who had terrible things happen in his life. I mean, people close to him die, and there was, uprisings within his own, within Rome, and he just had all these struggles, but there was so much gratitude that comes out in him through reading, basically his journal. And you see that with successful people. There's just so much gratitude that's expressed, and to make it a practice is really important, I think.
Yeah, what an amazing book. I haven't heard of that, but absolutely.
Yeah, and for the listener and for you, Gina, if you're interested, there's one particular translation that is, I think, most accessible and highly recommended. I actually I tried reading a different translation in the past, and it didn't really click with me. I just couldn't read it. But this one, there's a translation by Gregory Hayes, Hays. Gregory Hayes, who is coincidentally a professor at University of Virginia, which is my alma mater. But anyway, that's a great. It's just really written in plain English, just like you and I talking, or just like you and I might read something or write something. So that's the best translation of it. But it's really, really good.
Oh, that's so ancient. I like those ancient texts.
Yeah.
I still, and even today, I think my favorite success manual out of all of them, and I read so many books, is still the Bible. And of course, I went to school to be a minister, and it's a huge part of my life, but almost every success tactic that works, I can find where it was first like, hey, I used to teach that from the Bible.
Yeah. So many great success lessons in the Bible. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, Gina, I ask all of my guests, and maybe you already talked about this with your eating disorder, but I don't really see that as a failure, but maybe you can talk either about that or something else. But I ask all my guests, tell me about a time that you failed. And, so here you are, you're a published author, you're an international speaker, you work with professional athletes, you work with amazing people, you've done paid speeches since you were a teenager. I mean, has everything been easy for you? Has everything, have you ever failed and really felt that self-doubt, but you were able to eventually overcome that? And again, maybe you already alluded to that.
Yeah. I mean, that lowest point with that eating disorder after it'd been almost, 7 years, probably from the time I was 16, those 6-7 years. I didn't struggle so much the years that I was in Bible school, probably because I was surrounded by so much faith. But those lowest points, thinking, man, here I am speaking on all this success, representing one thing and living such an agonizing sense of shame, that was definitely my darkest hour, except that it played out later in what I call this financial anorexia. And so I remember, because, for years, every bite I ate, I was always tallying calories in my mind and, spinning out of control if I ate too much. And I remembered just financially just making a huge mistake. And I was trading the stock market, trading my own account, and I lost my whole account in 3 days. I blew up the account, and it was after a really successful year. And I just thought, how did this happen? And I looked back over all of it and thought, there's still that part of me that has that scarcity of not enough. I'm not thin enough, beautiful enough, smart enough, rich enough. There's not enough. And then it panics. And I'm thinking, if only I could build, throw out those rules that, trading wisely, like, oh my gosh, swing for the fences, make that, double that account, triple that account. It's other people have done it. And living from a sense of panicking to like it, as if that fulfillment is outside myself. And so it was, to me, that was devastating, because I thought, oh my gosh, I thought I was so free, but I replaced it with a whole nother disorder. And so I think getting through that came back to those same steps, visualizing being able to say, hey, that was so traumatic, but thank God, I can make that much money now in several different ways. I had to cling to that vision and making steps to recreate what was going to work in my wheelhouse.
So for the listener who likes to get action items out of these episodes, is that the next step for us? Is that the next step? Is it to identify where we want to be successful, maybe identify our why, write it down and visualize? I mean, is that the action step out of this?
For me, that's always the first action step, saying, okay, if this is where I am, what does it look like if I'm totally healthy? What's that person look like? Describe in full detail. What's it feel like? What's life look like? Who's with me? How successful are they? And that's been beautiful, watching my kids grow up so healthy and high achieving and just, oh my gosh, like, yay, thank you. And I've been super transparent with them all these years with my issues, but definitely that clear vision. And then the simplest steps, like what are the simplest ways that people who are successful think? And then what steps do they take, who you can emulate?
Yeah, that's good. I couldn't agree more. I mean, getting really clear on those things. Most people aren't willing to take the time to actually get off the treadmill of life and do those. Most people are just going to zip right through this podcast and onto another podcast. But I urge you, for the listener, hit the pause button on your life and ask yourself these questions. Actually do these things. One of the most common exercises that my guests do is they journal or they meditate.
Right.
I urge the listener to just hit the pause button on your life and journal on this, meditate on this. Shut the radio off or the however you're playing this. Hit pause and just listen and just think. Just think to this. Think in silence for yourself about this. So really, really great advice, Gina. I appreciate that. Do you have a favorite book that you could recommend? The listener always loves to get a book or two recommendation out of this. Any favorite books?
Wow. I read so many, but one that I always go back to is called The Greatest Secret in the World. My dad gave it to me when I was 16. So out of all the ones on my shelf, it's by far the most used and it's precious because it had his notes in it, by Og Mandino. And it was republished from The Greatest Salesman in the World. So it's kind of the exact same book, The Greatest Secret in the World or The Greatest Salesman in the World. And it's probably the first business parable that I ever read, and it's probably my favorite. I think you read these scrolls, that the main character was given these scrolls that changed his life, and they're basically affirmations. And I'd say that scroll Mark 2 says, I will begin this day with love, and I'll greet this day with love in my heart. And it's all about choosing love that day. It's probably done as much to shape my personality as anything.
That's a good one. I've actually never heard of that one. So this will be added to our reading list. So excellent. Thank you so much, Gina.
Yes.
And for the listener, could you, for the benefit of the listener, Gina, could you share a little bit how they can find you, follow you, interact with you, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. So my name's Gina Parris, GinaParris, and I kind of own that name on Twitter and Facebook. And at builttowin.com is my website. And so there you can get some great, I think right now it's a mini course or a video for my whole 5-step process, my Built to Win way. And I'd love to see you over there at builttowin.com, and you can see how to get more resources.
Excellent. And for the listener, I will have links to all of that in the action plan. So just go to jimharshawjr.com/action, and you'll be able to grab all those links to her social media as well as her website. So thank you so much, Gina, for making time to come on the show.
Oh, thank you. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, likewise. And for the listener, until next time, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success. Success Through Failure is a member of the Athlete on Fire podcast network. Check out all of our shows at athleteonfire.com.